Hi everyone, it's FSketcher fashion drawing tutorials, and in this lesson we're going to render this amazing Halpern design from Spring 2018 ready-to-wear collection. So as you can see here, we have a holographic effects and we have sequins and some reptilish pattern. So I hope you learn a lot from this tutorial. Right now I'm drawing the actual sketch. I'm drawing the head at the angle. There is separate tutorial on drawing heads on YouTube FSketcher channel, so you can check it out, and I provide the link to it in the video description. So, and I'm trying to draw this pose. So usually what is the distance till the shoulders and waist and hips? I usually draw the hips at 7 centimeters from her chin and her waist at 4.5 centimeters from her chin, and her shoulders around 1.5 centimeters. So I just calculate everything starting from the chin. So and then I just draw everything, trying to repeat the same angles as on the reference image. Like she's not looking at us, her body's turned a little bit. So that's why her right side is a bit longer than left side. So I allocated the widths a bit differently. So now I'm just finding I'm just checking at the reference image at which level her knees and ankles are located in relation to her upper body, because I drew upper body. So if you take a look at the reference image, you can see that your right side knee is at the same level as the right line of your neck. So, and your left side knee is located a little bit to the side from your shoulder, left side shoulder. So that's how I just locate with a different length. Like for hips till her knees, I usually calculate 6 centimeters, and from her knees till her ankles 8 centimeters. And as you can see on the reference image, her right side ankle is a bit located to the side, and the same but a bit less with her left side leg. Okay, so again 3/4 view. So that's why I moved her breast a bit to the left. So now I'm drawing her feet. Usually if it's high heels, then it's 2.5 centimeters in length. And when I look at the image, I try to ignore shoes, anything, just paying attention at the shape and outline. For her arms, I'm going to change the position because I'm not sure if the original Halpern design has like pockets where she can put her hands. So I'm going to bend her arms a little bit, and usually arms until the wrist in my sketches are 7 centimeters, and then I add hands. So now let's draw her clothing. So she has quite loose collar part, so it's like a turtleneck. So on illustration we usually exaggerate everything, so everything is a bit bigger and wider, and at certain parts more narrow. So here, since your sleeves are not starting right from your armpit, so I just will make them a bit lower than actually. You see that your armpits are inside of your sleeves. So her turtleneck is a bit loose at the waistline, and we have some wrinkles on her trousers in the crotch area. So, and her low part of her trousers is really wide, so I'm making it even wider on the illustration. So in this way you also feel the space, making the artwork pop out more. Because usually illustration that looks like fashion sketch, because fashion sketch is something that is made really fast. So this is more like illustration. There is a lot of white space unless you draw some background. So then you really play with the shape. So your hairstyle looks like your hair is wet, and as you can see, the hairline is a bit lower than the outline of the skull, and hair goes behind your ears. Right now I'm using fine liner. Usually I use 0.1, the size of the nib, and I just outline everything, but it's up to you, because some illustrators like outlining everything with a pencil or not outlining anything, so as you wish. So it's just a style thing. So next I'm using orchid color. Here in this tutorial I'm going to use many colors, but you don't have to. It's just, you know, this is a little bit holographic fabric and has many different reflecting many colors. As pink using Cerise Pro marker. Now I'm using aubergine color for these dots. I'm going to use several similar but still different tints because it's very reflective fabric, and at different angles one hue can look differently and shine differently. I'm coloring more on the top and on the sides. Now I'm using plum color, so mixing both. So top of your chest is like the prominent parts, they are less dark, and the sides usually darker. Adding a bit of soft green, but you can do it afterwards because we will put some like white ink and white liquid later, and on the top of it we will add this green and pink. So I'm still working with this aubergine and amethyst colors. So now I'm using Cool Gray 5 to make really dark dots. And here color, I just left really small like patches uncolored, but mostly it's totally dark. Now I'm using white ink gel pen, and I'm adding some shine on her color and more shine on her like top, the bodies. Some dots I make bigger and some are small. I really loved working with this texture. It just looks so cosmic. Sometimes I really don't draw just dots because, you know, all these little sparkles, they as a clusters, they mix and they look like shapes. So sometimes I draw shapes if there are many of them. So and now as ink dried, I'm using soft green, coloring on the top of those dots. More of aubergine. And orchid color. So here I just decided to add her hand because it just her arm ended in a weird way. More of aubergine color. And I'm starting from aubergine color because it's a bit darker, so I can define the places with shadows. So sometimes I just even color, you know, when if it's really a dark spot, and you don't need really to make you don't really need to make hundreds of dots. Just color it, and on the edges you'll show some dots. Now I'm using plum. We'll make it blend. So next I'm using amethyst color. It's lighter violet. So more is better in this case. More of aubergine. And I'm using orchid for the other sleeve. Cool Gray 5, let's just darken those parts. It looks like still looks a bit flat, so I want to add more volume, and you can do it by adding more shadows and highlights. So now I'm using white ink gel pen, and here I actually start drawing those a little bit reptile-ish shapes that resemble a crocodile skin, more like triangles or some squares, but not really squares. So the problem with white ink gel pen that is not that opaque, you can either color several times very carefully on the top of those shapes so it's still outline so you don't color inside, or you can use some other opaque liquid. Now I'm using soft green. Here is a Copic white opaque liquid. As you can see, it's really thick white. I tried to use it in previous tutorials. I simply cannot control this brush. Maybe I lack some skills, but it's really hard. So now Cool Gray 5 for the inside and some aubergine. But still, you know, in this case I like whatever I get with that brush, because in the end it doesn't look that bad. So I'm going to use it several times. So aubergine, I work in a very similar way with your other sleeve. Cool Gray 5, and let's just outline separate your bodies from your sleeve. Next, sometimes I color on the top of that white spots with pink and violet, so it's not always green, because everywhere it reflects different colors. Now I'm using Patty. First I'm showing the shadows, cheekbones, nose bridge, eyelids, ears, under her chin, under her lips, several times to make them really dark. And next I'm using almond and covering everything, including the shadows, so they can actually blend with the lighter area. More of Cool Gray 5 and more of aubergine, just want to add some dots here and there, and more shadows inside of your sleeves. Now I'm using purple pencil and showing the details and enhancing those shadows under her chin, cheekbones, the base only. Don't just repeat the same. This is a smaller shadows. Adding highlights with a white ink gel pen, ellipse above the triangle of her nose, and on her iris. So I'm using soft green right now. It's very similar to mint green, and I'm coloring most of her trousers. Here I'm using a bit of pastel green. It's very subtle color. It just gives a little bit of tint. So next, more of soft green. And since the paper is still wet because of pastel green, it's just really lays softly, a little bit bleeds even. Next, I'm showing really dark shadows in the folds, the low part, with Cool Gray 5. Their fabric is folded because it's a bit longer than the legs of our model. Next, I'm using, you can use Cool Gray 4 or Ice Gray 4, just a bit lighter gray. So you can show the transition from those dark shadows up a bit lighter. So, and I want to show some those wrinkles at the crotch area, in the crotch area, and add more shadows on the sides of that highlights the top of really big folds. more of a cool gray 5. So we start with the lightest colors. Whatever design you have, just try to determine which color is the lightest, or which color is at the base, because if it's some translucent fabric, then at the base will be the body color, and then you'll go from there. So more of a ice gray 4, more cool gray 5, cool gray 4 or ice gray 4, any of them. So as marker dries, you can layer, use again cool gray 5 and make it darker, those parts. So next I'm using pink and adding some pink highlights inside of those white stripes. Next I'm using a little bit of black. I'm making the dots inside of those dark shadowed parts. Next, using green, I'm making dots and more dots with cool gray 5. Okay, so now let's start working with the white ink gel pen. Again, on the edge, I'm just separating the parts, and then I'm adding dots along the trousers. And there we see some light area, there I add more, and a little bit on the dark spots. Here I want to draw that alligator-ish pattern. Really hard to use that brush, so I'm using just white ink gel pen, at least for the beginning. Maybe on the top I'll use opaque liquid later. And in some area where there are shadows and still is pattern, it shouldn't have to be very light, so it's okay to use white ink gel pen. And in order to show that somewhere it's not that visible, I draw the sides of those shapes with dots instead of lines. Just adding more highlights over here, more and more dots. And here again, you can see if you need somewhere some more of a cool gray 5 for shadows. So now I'm drawing those shapes to make them more visible. So here, but it's really cool to show this highlights like I'm drawing right now, because it's really good for just straight or curved lines, not really small shapes. So more dots everywhere. More shapes. Okay, so I have highlights and I feel like I need more shadows on the sides, more dots between those light dots. Next, more of the pattern below. So actually, whenever you have some pattern drawn with white ink gel pen, You really should think of making the background a bit darker, as we did below. Because if it was like really light gray or light green, this pattern would just, blend with the background and be invisible. More of gray. I just color on the top of that pattern somewhere, using orchid for the other part because it's reflecting the light, so it looks like more purple than green. So I want to add more of the dark dots with black. And again, I'm drawing that pattern with opaque white liquid. So next I'm using cool gray 5 and now turquoise color, so it's a bit dark green, and adding some dots. Okay, and let's work with the second half. I'm using plum color on the top, and I start from the shadows. It's the wrinkles, the crotch area, and the side. So starting from the sides, I make all these dots. And now I'm using slate. It's really dark. It looks like aubergine and cool gray 5 mixed. So I'm just covering the same area but a bit less of the dots, so you can still see the plum below. Next, I'm using cool gray 5, so even less area that I colored with slate. But you can see the texture right now is just there. And now I'm using white ink gel pen to add these amazing stars, because it looks like stars in the cosmos. So, and on the top of the wrinkles you can add the highlights just as the lines, and on the sides I want to draw these pattern. So, and the pattern with the opaque liquid. Here I define the path of the top of the wrinkle that will be light, and on the sides I'm adding these dots. If you draw it fast, they will blend and look like, like this. At this point I'm a bit tight, so I draw like lines. So I used plums, now I'm using aubergine, which is darker but very similar color. Now I'm using amethyst color. Here is like, you know, not exactly dots, I would say some dots and strokes, like mix. And now I'm using some black, not too much. And with white ink gel pen, I'm adding highlights. Just following that path that I drew in the beginning. And adding the pattern. Next, I'm using turquoise color, adding it on the top of highlights. With Cool Gray 5, I'm making darker some shadowed parts. More of the dots all over the trousers. This suit looks like a universe, like trapped on the surface of this fabric. You can use some ginger or burnt orange, some color as a base for your hair. And after that, I'm just using brown pencil and black pencil. So somewhere she has a little bit waxed hair that looks wet, and you know, hair separated into like several locks. So, and her hair is shining, so I'm going to use white ink gel pen that gives the shine of wax or wet hair. So I don't usually use it for highlights, for like just normal dry hair. And we're almost done. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I just added some background. So if you have any questions or suggestions, please ask in comment section below. Subscribe to FSketcher channel on YouTube, support it on Patreon, and get access to exclusive tutorials. And follow FSketcher on Instagram, like it on Facebook, check its database on Pinterest, and any new educational material on fsketcher.com. See you in next tutorial.